edge of a continent. The last frontier of the great Pacific Northwest. Glacier-capped peaks. Alpine meadows. Boldly carved river valleys. Lush virgin rainforests. And unspoiled ocean beaches teeming with marine life. Formidable and magnificent. This is America's spectacular wilderness heritage, Olympic National Park. Located in the western portion of the state of Washington, Olympic National Park is one of the most diverse wilderness areas in America. Within Olympic, there are 3 distinct and extraordinary landscapes, and each qualifies as a great national treasure. The Olympic Mountains, eternally snow-capped and punctuated by some 60 active glaciers. A rainforest as green and dense as an Amazon jungle. And a 57-mile stretch of beach that is as raw and wild as any in the country. The Olympic Mountains block moist air masses that blow in from the Pacific. As the air masses rise to cross the mountains, they cool rapidly, and the moisture they contain condenses into clouds, rain, and at higher elevations, snow. As a result, the western slopes of the Olympics receive as much as 145 inches of precipitation annually, more than any other place in the contiguous 48 states. Below the mountains, in the western-facing valleys of the Quinault, Keats, and Hoh Rivers, lies a wondrous botanical treasure, the Olympic rainforest. Climatic conditions needed to create a temperate rainforest, a mild coastal climate, heavy summer fog, and a very generous rainfall are extremely rare. Outside of the Pacific Northwest, similar conditions are found only in southern Chile and in New Zealand. The Hall of Mosses Trail in the Hoh Rainforest offers an extraordinary glimpse into this lush universe of green. The rainforest is distinguished by stands of Sitka spruce and western hemlock. These trees grow larger here than they do anywhere else on Earth. Sitka spruce are joined by a host of other cone-bearing giants, including the massive western red cedar with its distinctively colored bark and pleasing aroma. Beneath this cathedral-like splendor, maples spread a lacy canopy. Due to the abundant moisture, these huge trees do not grow deep roots. Strong winds can topple them. Once a fallen tree begins to decay, it is called a nurse log. It supports seedlings that would otherwise have difficulty germinating on the fern and moss-covered forest floor. After the nurse log has decomposed, a row of mature trees remains, standing on stilt-like roots. The rainforest is typified by high concentrations of plants and by intense competition for space. Big-leaf maples become upholstered, draped with club moss, licorice fern, and liverworts. A plant that grows on another plant but is not a parasite is called an epiphyte. They are not harmful to the tree unless too many crowd on a branch and their sheer weight breaks the limb. In the rainforest, more than 90 species of epiphytes grow in profusion. The lush greenery of the rainforest also attracts its share of wildlife. The Columbian black-tailed deer is the smallest type of North American mule deer. Although seemingly tame and approachable, when startled or frightened, the deer can strike severe blows with their sharp hooves. Black-tailed deer are vegetarians and feed on a wide variety of greenery. Because dense rainforests can make birdwatching difficult, the banks of creeks and rivers offer more open spots for observation. Harlequin duck, bald eagle, merganser, and kingfisher are among the species that may be seen. The great blue heron can often be seen wading in the waters of Olympic. This large, elegant bird remains motionless for long moments until its bill whips into the water, emerging with the catch of the day. River otters are common in the ocean and rivers of Olympic. Their playful antics belie the fact that they voraciously prey upon fish and other small animals. One of the most unforgettable sounds in Olympic is the piercing bugle of a 1,000-pound bull elk. Indeed, one of the proposed names for Olympic had been Elk National Park, since protection of the elk was one of the primary reasons for its creation. Today, the largest herd of wild Roosevelt elk in the nation lives in Olympic. These impressive elk were named in honor of President Theodore Roosevelt. Later, in 1909, he designated the area a national monument. The Hoh still looks much as it did to the early pioneers who came to farm this river valley at the turn of the century. One of the most famous early settlers was John Hulsdonk, whose wilderness skills and feats of strength have become legendary. Marilyn Lewis is the granddaughter of the pioneer who became known as the Iron Man of the Hoh.
My grandfather and his brother Henry left Iowa in 1890 and came to the valley to settle, looking for a home in the wilderness. The government was giving land to settlers to settle. You had to clear. Cab did what the government asked.
According to legend, the supply he carried on his back. One such item was a cast iron stove. When asked if it was too heavy, he is said to have replied,
"Only when the sack of flour in the oven shifts around."
After John established his homestead, he went back to Iowa and married his childhood sweetheart. Dora Hjulsdonk, seen here in early family home movies, was every bit as remarkable as her famous husband. She gave birth to 4 daughters without the help of a doctor, and she held down the family homestead alone for weeks at a time when her husband was out hunting, surveying, or working in logging camps to support their pioneer brood.
My grandmother and grandfather had a very gentle, loving relationship, always kind to one another. It was a romantic story. How else could any man get a woman to live in the wilderness for 50 years and raise him 4 big, strong daughters?
Dora Hjulsdonk left the Hoe only twice during the half-century she lived here. She and her husband were too busy carving a livelihood out of the wilderness and teaching their daughters the skills of self-sufficiency.
I would describe my mother's and her sisters as being very capable women. We never grew up, any of us, with the idea there wasn't anything we couldn't do. Well, they knew how to hunt. They knew how to, of course, shoot with hunting. They knew how to fish. They knew how to track. They knew how to trap. They knew how to do things that nowadays women don't have the foggiest idea how to do. I'm Eric.
Marilyn Lewis still lives in the Hoe rainforest, working a farm that is part of the original family homestead. Her life is not so different from the way her grandparents lived, and that's just the way she likes it.
The animals, the weather, the decor around me, the changing scenes of spring, summer, fall, winter. It's just a cleaner life and a healthier life and a more open life, I think. You have more to do with nature than you... It's just different.
You're getting all the corn. Yeah, you are. Yeah.
The Hoe Valley, so beloved by the Iron Man and women of the Hjulsdonk family, lies in the shadow of Mount Olympus, the crown jewel of the peninsula. At nearly 8,000 feet, it is the highest peak in the park. The massive mountain shoulders 7 active glaciers, some of which may be as long as 3 miles and in some places 900 feet thick. Northeast of Mount Olympus is Hurricane Ridge, named for the 60-mile-an-hour winds that blast across it in the winter. The ridge offers one of the more breathtaking views of the park. It also affords glimpses of Olympic's extraordinary wildlife. Though blue grouse are found at all elevations in the park, they are most commonly seen on Hurricane Ridge. In other parts of the American West, black bears may sport either black or brown coats. But in Olympic, all bears are black. They feed on grasses, nuts, berries, insects, and fish. When smaller animals forage for food, they must also be wary of large animals. Marmot has developed an interesting way to deal with this threat. One of the marmots climbs for the rest of the small colony. At the first sign of potential danger, the sentinel whistles and all of the marmots dash for their burrows. Despite the unique natural diversity of the Olympic area, Washington State's powerful logging and mining industries fiercely resisted the idea of establishing a national park on the peninsula. But in the fall of 1937, during a visit to the area, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was impressed with the importance of preserving this wilderness treasure. At his urging on June 16, 1938, Congress changed Olympic status from national monument to national park. Among the many attractions that impressed President Roosevelt was Lake Crescent. Lying at the base of Storm King Mountain, among the giant fir and hemlock trees near the northern edge of the park, this gem of the Olympics has been both a popular resort and an idyllic retreat since the 1890s. The trails around the lake reveal a fragile, pastoral beauty. Nearby at Merrymere Falls, a 90-foot cascade mesmerizes passers-by. West of Lake Crescent is Solduck Falls, a scene out of a fairy tale kingdom. Each season of the year brings different colors and textures to the delicate landscape. Because of the dense vegetation and jagged mountains, many of Olympic's treasures, such as Solduck Falls, remained undiscovered by European explorers for centuries. In 1788, Captain John Meares of the Royal British Navy sailed along the coast and glimpsed the crown of these massive mountains. In his ship's log, he recorded,
"If that be not the home where dwell the gods, it is beautiful enough to be, and I therefore call it Mount Olympus."
Because of the isolation of the Olympic range, superstitions arose and the mountains were thought to be haunted. Madmen were said to live up there. In 1889, a newspaper, the Seattle Press, sponsored an expedition to explore the Olympic Mountains. For 6 months, during one of the most severe winters on record, the brave members of the Press expedition completed the first well-documented north-south crossing of the mountains. Today, that same trip takes only 4 or 5 days. As if a verdant rainforest and a bold mountain range weren't enough natural bounty for one peninsula, the river valleys of the Olympic National Park also lead to one of the most dramatic stretches of wilderness coast on the continent. The wild, raw beauty of the Olympic seashore camouflages delicately balanced ecosystems, complex, fragile, and precious. At first glance, Rialto Beach is a stark, almost primordial landscape. Giant, uprooted trees, bleached by the sun, stripped and polished smooth by the sea, lie like ancient skeletons in a timeless graveyard. Fierce winds can whip the waves into destructive walls of water. The relentless onslaught of the sea hammers out a striking tableau. Massive rocks rise from the water like ravaged fortresses. These sea stacks were once part of the landmass, but as waves chiseled away the softer stone, only the harder, more resistant cores remained. The gravitational pull of the moon and the daily rotation of the Earth combine to produce tides of extraordinary intensity. Often, tide pool inhabitants must endure continuous cycles of hot sun and pounding surf, followed by submersion in cold salt water. This relentless cycle would seem to be enough to discourage potential seashore dwellers. But in fact, this strip of sand and rock is actually teeming with intriguing and exotic creatures. Kerry Jones is a park ranger who guides groups on walks along the shore to explore the subtle and often overlooked wonders of this remarkable environment.
This is a wonderful rock here. It's completely covered with life. It's a wonderful example of how life crowds into the intertidal area. They're all competing for resources here, food, and just a place to live. So here we have the sea stars. The orange ones and purple ones and reddish ones are all the same species, the ochre sea star, Pysester loquacius. Nobody really knows why they're different colors. It's just like people have different hair. It seems to be no particular advantage or disadvantage to being one color over the other. We have one here you can feel. I'll pass it around in a minute. It's got its skeleton on the outside. It's hard. It has its tube feet. You can see these little feet. They move slowly around. They're searching for something to grip onto now that it's been taken off of its home. It has a mouth in the center underneath. Now here's the question of the day. We look at the rocks, and you see that they're all covered with bits and pieces of plant matter and barnacles, all sorts of encrusting things. And the sea star moves very slowly. How can it keep itself so clean? It has on its back small pinching devices. And when a larval barnacle tries to settle on its back, these little pedicellaria stalk pinchers come out and they grip and clean its back. This lightly grips her hair with these little pinchers, trying to clean its back.
Although certainly well-groomed, a sea star has indiscriminate dining habits and will eat almost anything within reach of its stomach. The sea star can wrap its powerful suction legs around the shell of a mussel, pry it open, then push its own stomach into the victim's shell and digest it on the spot. Acorn and gooseneck barnacles, standing on their heads inside their tough shells, open tiny hatches and stretch out feathery legs to sweep in any food particles that may be floating by. Mussels living in colonies open their shells to pump seawater through their bodies and filter out small organisms from the water. Like a tiny dredge, the keyhole limpet siphons water and food particles through its tiny gill system, discharging the water through the distinctive hole at the top of its shell.
So we have a purple sea urchin. There's purple urchins, red urchins, and green urchins on the Pacific coast. And it protects itself with these spines, and these guys are vegetarians. They eat kelp, algae that drift in. But between each of the rows of spines, it has pinching devices like the sea star does. The sea stars and the urchins are related. If the sea stars have 5 arms, and we could get a real close view of the mouth of the urchin, you'd see that it has 5 plates to it. And between the rows of spines, it has both the pinchers and little tube feet. You can see that its spines will be moving. If it's underwater and it senses danger from one direction, it'll put all of its spines in that direction. And it'll try. It's holding on to my fingers now with its little tube feet. You see them? Oh, there, just let go.
As the tide goes out and the dense and colorful variety of intertidal species is exposed, various predators arrive to feed. The shorebirds of the Olympic coast have adapted remarkably well to an amphibious existence. While most birds could not survive if forced to drink only seawater, coastal birds are equipped with salt glands that remove salt from both the water and the food they ingest. Some, such as the oystercatcher, have a beak shaped like a double-edged knife for opening shells. The cormorant and the pelican fold their wings against their body when they dive in search of food. Both birds are powerful swimmers with excellent underwater vision. The waters of the Olympic shore also teem with marine mammals. Although these harbor seals are year-round residents, there are also temporary visitors, including sea lions, dolphins, and whales. Survival in the intertidal community is an art form, and each creature has developed its own expertise, its own special link in the tapestry of this complex environment. The Native American tribes of the Olympic Peninsula have lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years. When European explorers arrived in this region in the 18th century, 9 tribes lived in villages along the coastal lowlands. The northwestern tip of the Olympic Peninsula is the home of the Makah Indians. The survival of their 2,000-year-old culture is an affirmation of their strong tribal identity and deep respect for traditional values. Hamilton Green is a Makah tribal leader.
I think when the European people came into our country, they brought with them a custom that we were not used to, and we couldn't understand exactly what they wanted from us, and they kept us from trying to keep our culture alive. We couldn't even speak our own language hardly. If we maintain the knowledge of our language and our culture and songs and dances, it identifies us as Indian people of who we are and where we are from originally. We have in our culture a salmon bake, which we roast by the fire on cedar sticks, and it's tied up in a manner that it will not fall off the stick, and it's fresh fish that we use, and it's baked for an hour on each side. And when you eat that kind of a fish, you know that you can't help but be happy. Dancing means a lot to an Indian person because it is part of their training, it is part of their upbringing, and having your own family song and dances, you are identified to that group of people that own that song. They own their own songs and dances. These songs and dances are created by the ancestors a long time ago when they would be training for being a whale hunter or a seal hunter or a fisherman. They would have to go up in the mountains to pray and fast, and they would be there for days maybe, and then maybe when they returned with that power to be a whale hunter, they would have a song to go with it and a dance, and that would be their identity for life. So that's how we got our songs and dances, and that's why we're proud of our culture.
From ancient native cultures to enduring natural wonders, Olympic National Park provides a uniquely diverse wilderness experience. Towering mountains, lush rainforests, and windswept beaches. There are landscapes here to challenge the imagination and soothe the soul. A land of startling contrasts and rich variety, Olympic National Park is truly a treasure of the Pacific Northwest.